Wyoming Territory, late autumn, 1872. The wind tore across the plains outside of Rawlins like it had teeth, and Eliza North's hands trembled as she clutched the threadbare shawl tighter around her shoulders. Her boots had holes worn clean through, and the toes of her stockings peeked out, mottled with dirt. She stood behind the livery, half hidden in the alley, watching a man toss uneaten beans into a slop bucket. Her pride had cracked weeks ago, shattered entirely when her last coin went to bury her husband in a pine box too small for his long legs. She had not eaten since yesterday morning. "Please," she said, her voice hoarse. "Could I just the crust, sir?" The man looked her over with disgust, then turned away. "Go on now," he muttered. "No handouts for beggars." Eliza stepped back, cheeks hot with shame. She had once had a home, a husband, 2 children. Now she had nothing but cold wind and hunger. Her children, Addie and Amos, were gone. The wagon train that had carried them west shattered in a spring storm, and the man who promised to help her had taken her children on ahead when her husband fell ill. She never saw them again. The trail captain had said they died from fever, but she had never believed him. Eliza drifted back toward the edge of town, where the land opened wide and the sky stretched forever. Her legs ached. Her stomach growled. A few boys threw stones at her when she passed near the mercantile. "Beggar woman," they laughed. She kept walking out beyond the train tracks. A small Cheyenne camp had settled for the season, far enough from town to avoid trouble, close enough to trade. She had heard talk of them, warriors and women who did not take kindly to white settlements, but who had come to peace last winter after the army raids. Folks spoke of them in hushed tones, always with fear or suspicion. Eliza did not have the luxury to be afraid. She meant only to watch. Maybe they had food. Maybe they would not throw rocks. She crouched near a cottonwood, watching thin curls of smoke drift from their fires. A few children chased each other, laughing. Women stirred pots. Horses grazed nearby. She did not expect to be seen, but someone had seen her. He moved like the wind itself, silent, sure. He stepped out from behind a tree, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing beaded buckskin and a red cloth around his braids. His eyes were dark, steady. Eliza jolted back, stumbling, heart hammering. "I will not hurt you," he said. His voice was calm, deep. She froze. "My name is Cota Blackbird," he said. "You are hungry." She nodded, too weak to lie. He looked at her for a moment, then turned. "Come," he said. Eliza hesitated. She had never been in a Cheyenne camp, but her legs moved anyway, following him. He led her past curious eyes, past the fires, to a woman with silver streaks in her braid. She looked at Eliza with no pity, only a firm nod, and handed over a bowl of warm stew. Eliza's hands shook as she took it. One spoonful in, tears slipped down her face. She tried to hide them. Failed. "You have no one?" Cota asked quietly, kneeling beside her. "My husband died 2 months ago," she whispered. "He got fever. We were coming from Kansas." He nodded once. "I had children," she said, voice raw. "A man took them ahead when we got stuck. He said he would wait for me." "He did not." Cota's jaw tightened. "You searched." "I did," she breathed. "They said my babies died, but I never saw them. I do not believe it." "You are alone," he said. She nodded. "Not anymore." She met his eyes then. Something steady passed between them like a thread pulling tight. He stood. "You will stay tonight," he said. Eliza blinked. "Why? You are cold," he said, "and you should not sleep in the dirt." She should have said no, but her body hurt, her bones ached, and for the first time in weeks someone looked at her like she was not filth. She stayed. The women gave her a blanket and a place near the fire. Children watched her curiously but did not mock. That night she slept with warmth on her skin and the sound of quiet breathing around her. In the morning she meant to leave. She had no claim here, but Cota was waiting. "You will eat." She ate. "You will rest." She rested. The days stretched. She helped the women grind corn, gather water, clean hides. They did not speak much to her, but they did not turn her away. Cota watched her, always nearby. He spoke little, but when he did, his words carried weight. One night she found him carving patterns into a piece of wood beside the fire. "Why are you doing that?" she asked. "For trade," he said, "and for peace." She sat beside him. "You do not seem like a warrior." "I am," he said. "But I do not fight unless I must. I have known many men who fought for less." He glanced at her, then back to his carving. "You have known pain." She looked down. "Too much." He was quiet a moment. "That man who took your children," he said. "Do you remember his name?" Her throat tightened. "Harlan Tisdale." Cota set his carving down. "I will find him." Eliza's eyes widened. "Why would you do that?" He looked at her. "Because you do not deserve to suffer alone." Tears welled, but she pushed them back. "You do not know me. I know enough." She searched his face. There was no lie there, only truth, quiet and steady. Days turned to weeks. Eliza grew stronger. The women began to speak to her more. They let her braid the girls' hair, sew with them, share stories. Each night she found herself near Cota's fire. He told her about his brother, killed in a raid. About the winter they lost half their horses. About the time he nearly drowned in the Platte River. She laughed then, and he looked at her like it was the first time he had heard something sacred, and one night he said, "You are not meant to be alone, Eliza." Her breath caught. "You have endured much," he said, "but you are still standing. That matters." She looked into his eyes. "I do not know if I can love again." He reached for her hand, calloused and trembling. "You do not have to know, just stay." She did. That winter, Cota rode to Rawlins. He walked into the sheriff's office and placed a bundle on the desk: beaded leather, buffalo robes, and 3 fine horses. "This is bride price," he said. The sheriff blinked. "For who?" Cota's voice was clear. "For Eliza North. She is no longer a beggar. She is to be my wife." When he returned to the camp, Eliza stood outside the lodge, her eyes wide. He held out his hand. "If you will have me." Her heart beat wild in her chest. "Yes," she whispered, and when he lifted her fingers to his lips, the whole world went still. The wind moved differently. Come late December, slower, heavier. Snow had settled into the earth's creases, gathering against the bases of trees and flattening the distant plains in a hush. Eliza stood outside the lodge, arms buried in a buffalo robe, watching the sky pale with morning. Her breath floated in soft clouds. Behind her, a pot of water warmed over the firestones, and the sound of someone tending horses drifted from the edge of camp. Cota returned just after sunup, the leather ties of his coat stiff with frost. He carried a bundle in one hand, wrapped in blue calico. "I stopped at the trading station," he said, setting it in her arms. She touched the cloth, then looked up. "You didn't need to. I wanted to." Inside the bundle lay a pair of wool stockings, finer than anything she'd worn in years, a tin comb, and a folded length of muslin dyed deep gold. She ran her fingers over the fabric, stunned by the smoothness. "I haven't had anything new since before Kansas," she said. He nodded once, then stepped back and began brushing the last of the snow from his sleeves. The silence between them had grown steady these past weeks, not empty, but full in its own right. Eliza glanced toward the hills beyond the valley. "You said your uncle lives near the Medicine Bow Range." "He does. He keeps horses and 3 grandsons. Will he come for the spring gathering?" Cota tied back his braid with a strip of rawhide. "He will. He's not fond of cold months." She smiled faintly. "I can't blame him." She had begun to learn how things moved in the camp, the rhythms of the days, the unspoken customs. She had learned to listen first and speak second, to leave space around her words. The women had offered her a separate lodge 2 weeks past, but she'd chosen to remain near Cota's fire. Not out of fear or uncertainty, but because she no longer wanted to be anywhere else. That evening, the elders gathered in the center lodge to prepare for a ceremony. Cota did not speak of it until dusk, when he returned with ochre powder on his palms and a strip of red cloth tied around his wrist. "There's to be a naming," he said. "One of the young ones has come of age." Eliza followed him to the fire circle, where songs rose into the dark and cedar smoke curled into the cold air. She sat beside him, close enough to feel the heat from his knee against hers. Her eyes tracked the movement of the dancers, the steady beat of the drum like a second heartbeat. When the songs ended, Cota leaned in and said, "The boy they named tonight, his mother lost 2 children before him. She wept when he walked through the fire without fear. Eliza's throat tightened. "He's brave. He is loved," he said. She looked at him. "Were you given your name as a child?" "My father named me when I was 7, he said. "After the blackbird that returned each spring to the same tree, he said I would keep coming back to the people I loved." She tilted her head. "Have you?" "I returned after the raids," he said. "I returned after the army burned our winter store. I returned when my brother's body was laid down in the snow." He turned toward her then, fully. "And I came back to you," her breath caught. "You don't even know what I was before all this. I know what you are now." She looked down at her hands. "I still dream of the children. Some nights I think I hear Addie's laugh or Amos calling for water." He didn't offer comfort in words. Instead, he reached out and enclosed her hand in his. His palm was warm, rough with years of work, and steady. After the ceremony, they returned to the lodge. She sat beside the fire, folding the muslin he'd given her, smoothing the creases. "I could make a dress," she said. "You should." She hesitated. "Something for spring." He crouched beside her, catching her gaze. "Then we'll wait for spring." She looked into his eyes, and something softened in her chest. Not ease, not yet, but something near it. That night, she lay on her side beneath the robe, the fire casting long shadows on the lodge walls. She listened to Cota's breathing across the space, steady and close. And for the first time in years, she closed her eyes without fear that the morning would take everything from her again. The snow thickened as January turned. Eliza learned to stitch moccasins with sinew thread, to scrape hides with rounded bone, to grind herbs fine enough for healing salves. One of the older women, Nemaha, began teaching her the uses of local roots, how to dry them, how to steep them into tonics. "You have good hands," Nemaha said one morning, watching Eliza bind a poultice for a child's sprained wrist. Eliza smiled faintly. "I used to mend clothes, back in Kansas." Nemaha nodded. "You mend more than cloth now." Later that day, Eliza found Cota near the riverbank where he was training a young bay colt to lead. She stood quiet until he noticed her. "You have new skill," he said, brushing the colt's mane. "Nemaha says I help," she said. "You do?" She stepped closer. "Cota, when the snow melts, will we leave this place?" "Yes," he said. "We go east toward the valley where the grasses grow tall." She watched the horse nuzzle his shoulder. "Will there be room for me there?" "There will be a place that belongs to you," he said. "If you choose it." She met his eyes. "I do." And so he reached out, slow and certain, and placed her hand against the colt's warm neck. They stood like that for a long while, the wind soft through the dry grass, the river moving beneath its thin coat of ice. Neither of them spoke again until the sun dropped low, and the shadows stretched toward the long road ahead. A thaw crept into the earth by mid-March, not enough to soften it fully, but enough to loosen the topsoil and swell the creeks with meltwater. Eliza crouched beside the fire pit outside the lodge, pressing a narrow strip of willow bark beneath the weight of a flat stone. The bitter scent clung to her hands. Nemaha had taught her how to prepare it for fever, and now others brought her bundles to dry and store. She did not ask for it, but they left it by her lodge flap all the same. Today, though, her thoughts wandered to the oak box Cota had brought from Rawlins a few nights before. He'd placed it beside her without a word, then gone to tend the horses. Inside, she'd found a folded paper from the land agent's office, marked by an ink seal she did not know how to read. She'd stared at it until the fire burned low. When Cota returned, she finally asked, "Why did you go to the land agent?" He'd crouched beside her, hands on his knees. "To put your name on something that can't be taken." She hadn't spoken. Couldn't. The years had stripped away so much that the idea of owning anything land, name, place felt unreal, but Cota had waited patient. Always that, a wind picked up now, pulling her back to the present. She brushed bark dust from her skirt and stood, stretching her back slow. The sun had risen higher than she expected. Cota was in the distance, kneeling beside a yearling with a twisted foreleg. He moved carefully, pressing his palm against the joint, whispering to calm the animal. Eliza watched the way he tilted his head, the slight narrowing of his eyes. He was always reading things, weather, wounds, people. She made her way across the dry grass, her boots sinking slightly in thawed patches. When she reached him, he glanced up. "Joints swollen," he said. "Too much strain on young legs. Can it mend, if he stays off it?" She crouched beside him, resting her skirt just above the damp earth. "He'll hate that." Cota gave a small nod, then reached into his satchel. "I've a wrap for it." "He'll fight me, though. I'll keep him still." Together they bound the leg in soft hide, Cota's movements precise. The colt flinched but didn't bolt. Eliza ran her hand along its neck, murmuring something she didn't think about. When they finished, the horse rested its weight gingerly but didn't collapse. Cota brushed the dust from his sleeves. "You've a way with the young ones." "I had to," she said. "My boy was wild as a spring hare, always climbing things." "You never said what he looked like." Her hands paused. "Dark curls, big eyes, laughed with his whole face." Cota sat back on his heels. "Do you want to look for him again?" Eliza didn't answer at once. The wind caught her braid, tugging it over her shoulder. "I don't know where to start." "That man Tisdale, he could have gone anywhere." "I spoke to someone," Cota said. "A freighter who took the northern tracks before the snows. He remembered a wagon matching Tisdale's, said he traveled toward the Powder River country, near Sheridan." Eliza blinked. "That far north, too far for snow travel, but not in spring." She pressed her palms to her knees, trying to breathe steady. "What else did he say?" "That the man had children with him, a girl and a boy, pale but sun-darkened." "The girl wore a faded red shawl." Eliza's mouth parted, but no sound came. "You told me Addie had one," he said. "Before you left Kansas," she nodded slowly. "My sister gave it to her. We wrapped it around her shoulders the day we left." Cota stood, offering a hand. "We'll go after the last frost, if you want to." Eliza took his hand and rose. "Yes, I want to." They walked back together in silence, the colt limping behind them, the sun warming their backs. That evening, Eliza laid out the muslin he'd given her weeks ago. She'd already cut the shape by firelight 2 nights past, but now her needle moved with purpose, each stitch steady. She hadn't sewn for herself in years, not since Amos's 3rd birthday, when she'd made herself a blue ribbon to wear around her throat. Cota entered quietly, brushing snowmelt from his shoulders. He watched her for a moment, then stepped closer. "You'll wear that for travel?" She didn't look up. "For something else?" He crouched beside her. "Tell me." She set the needle aside. "When we find them, if we find them, I want to be ready. I want them to see me not as the woman who lost them, but the one who came back." Cota's voice was low. "They'll see both." She turned to him. "And if they don't remember me, they'll know who you are," he said. "Because you'll still be the woman who carried their names every day." She pressed her hand to her chest. "I don't know how to thank you." "Don't," he said. "Just stay beside me." She reached for his wrist, the one wrapped in red cloth. Her fingers rested lightly there. "I will." Later, as the fire burned low and the camp quieted, Cota reached for her hand under the robe they now shared. His palm found hers, fingers lacing together beneath the wool. He didn't speak. He never pressed. But Eliza shifted closer, her face near the hollow of his throat, letting the quiet hold them both. Outside, the thaw continued in slow silence, and beneath the earth, roots stirred. The last frost broke during the 2nd week of April, when the snowmelt ran clear and fast through the riverbeds, and the scent of damp earth replaced smoke in the mornings. The camp began to shift, then lodges dismantled, hides packed, dried meat wrapped in bark and cloth. Cota had said they'd move east with the thaw, but he'd made quiet preparations for a different route, north, toward the Powder River country. Eliza stood beside a mare with a white blaze, adjusting the saddle bundles. Her palms were raw from lashing together birch bark containers, her arms sore from packing the last of the dried roots and folded cloths. But she moved steadily. Her breath came easy. She had not felt this kind of forward pull in years. "I've traded for 2 weeks' grain," Cota said, approaching with a fresh wrapped roll of pemmican. "We'll camp near the old buffalo wallows first. she nodded, checking the cinch. And after that, there's a trader's post near the Little Goose Creek. That freighter said Tisdale passed near there before winter closed the pass. Eliza tied off the last bundle. Did you tell anyone else where we're going? Only Nemaha. She didn't try to stop you. She said it's a journey worth making. They rode out at first light, just the two of them, wrapped in wool and leather, the sun behind their shoulders. The land opened wide as they traveled, the hills sloping into broad meadows, the sky too large to hold in one glance. Eliza had forgotten what it felt like to ride for something instead of away. On the third day, they passed the skeleton of a burned-out way station. Charred timbers jutted from the ground like broken teeth. Eliza slowed her mare, gaze fixed on the scorched remains. Stage line, she asked. Used to be. Army burned it when the last of the freighters pulled out. She studied the blackened beams. Everything left behind burns. Cota reined in beside her. Not everything. They made camp that night beside a cottonwood grove, dry branches snapping underfoot. Cota built a windbreak from pine limbs while Eliza laid out the bedding. The fire flickered low between them, its light catching in Cota's hair as he leaned back against his saddle, arms crossed loosely. Your brother, Eliza said. The one you lost, what was his name? Nakos. She said it quietly, feeling the shape of it. What was he like? Restless, Cota said. He'd never sit through a hunt story, always wanted the end first, she smiled. My Addie was like that with bedtime tales. She'd beg me to skip ahead. Cota's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed level. He was younger, thought the world couldn't break him. Did it? It tried, he said. But he broke first, that's different. Eliza looked into the fire. I thought I was broken for a long time, you weren't. How do you know? Because you still see things. The way you looked at that colt, the way you listen when people speak. Broken things turn inward. You haven't. She didn't answer. Just reached for his hand where it rested on the blanket and curled her fingers between his. They rose early, riding north by the pale light of a cloudless dawn. On the seventh day, they reached a trail fork marked by a split boulder and a weathered post driven into the ground, its top carved with faint initials. H.T. Eliza dismounted slowly. He passed this way. Cota crouched beside the post, brushing away the dirt with his thumb. Fresh shoe marks. 2 wagons, light load, maybe children inside. Eliza stepped closer. She didn't speak, but her shoulders fell forward slightly as if the weight of the years had shifted position. They followed the trail into a narrow valley lined with firs where a low creek wound between the rocks. Midday brought them to a small homestead, one lean-to, a lean horse, and a line of laundry caught in the wind. A woman stood near the porch, knitting something from coarse wool. She looked up as they approached, eyes wary. Cota raised a hand in greeting. We're looking for a man named Harlan Tisdale. Came through here before the snows. The woman squinted. Tisdale, I saw his wagon, camped down near the Black Ridge, had 2 young'uns with him. Eliza leaned forward in the saddle. Did they look well? Thin, the woman said, but not sickly. The girl had a cough, though. He said he was heading east toward the Bighorn Edge, looking for a claim. How long ago? 3 weeks, maybe 4, hard to say. He didn't linger. Eliza reached for her water flask with shaking hands. Cota nodded. Thank you. They pressed on, riding until the sun dipped behind the ridge and the cold crept back in. That night, Eliza sat beside the fire with her knees drawn to her chest, the hem of her dress dusted from the trail. They're alive, she said. Cota stirred the coals. They are. I don't know what they'll think of me. They'll know you came. She reached into her pack and pulled out a small cloth bundle. Inside lay 2 wooden dolls worn smooth with age. I carved these for them before we left Kansas. Addie lost hers once by the river. I made her another. Cota turned one over in his hand. You carried these all this time, she nodded. Through everything. He placed it back in her palm. Then they'll remember, she looked up. You believe that? I do. The moon rose slow and full over the pines. Eliza leaned her head against his shoulder, her hand still clutching the cloth bundle. I'm not afraid anymore, she whispered. You don't have to be, he said. And as the fire burned low and the stars thickened above them, they sat together in the hush between what had been and what was coming, steady as the land beneath them. They found the cabin late on the 14th day, tucked into a slope of wind-hardened grass and pine, a thin curl of smoke rising from its crooked chimney. It sat near the edge of a frozen creek, half-shuttered, with a broken wagon tongue leaning against a stump beside the lean-to. The horses whickered as Cota drew them to a halt behind a stand of juniper. Eliza's hands tightened around the reins. Cota dismounted first. "Stay behind me until I speak." Eliza nodded. Her breath came shallow, her heart tripping over itself. She hadn't eaten since sunrise. Cota approached slow, his boots crunching over old snow. A dog barked from inside, sharp and territorial. A man stepped out, rifle in hand. His beard had gone to gray, his shoulders narrow beneath a sagging coat. He squinted into the low sun. "What are you after?" the man called. "I'm looking for your name," Cota said evenly. The man shifted. "You Cheyenne?" "I am. I don't trade with your kind. We're not here to trade." Eliza stepped out then, her voice dry. "We're here for the children." The rifle lowered an inch. "What children?" "You know who I mean, Harlan," she said. He blinked hard, then looked at her as if seeing a ghost. You were left behind. You left me behind." The rifle dipped. "They were sick. I couldn't wait. The boy near died before we reached shelter." "You said you'd wait," she said, stepping closer. "You said you'd see me to them." "I did what I had to." "No, you did what was easy." He looked past her to Cota. "You put her up to this." Cota didn't answer. A child's voice called faintly from inside. "Papa?" Eliza's breath caught. Her knees nearly gave, but she kept standing. "Addie," she whispered. The door opened. A girl of about 9 peered out, hair tangled, face thin but unmistakable. She stared at Eliza for a long moment, then blinked slowly. "Mama," she said, voice rising. Eliza took a step. "Sweetheart." "Yes." The girl ran forward, feet bare on packed snow, colliding into Eliza's arms with a force that knocked the wind from her. She wrapped herself around her mother's waist, sobbing into her coat. "I thought you died," Addie cried. "No, no," Eliza said, dropping to her knees in the snow, holding her close. "I never stopped looking." A smaller figure appeared in the doorway. A boy, thinner than his sister, stood stiff as a sapling, clutching a wooden spoon. His face was pale, his eyes wide. "Amos," Eliza said, reaching out. "Come here, my love." He hesitated, then dropped the spoon and ran. They stayed 2 nights. Eliza refused to sleep under Tisdale's roof, but Cota built a shelter from pine poles and canvas behind the cabin. The children never left her side. Addie curled against her each night, whispering half-remembered songs, while Amos pressed his face into her shoulder as if afraid she might vanish in the dark. Tisdale didn't speak much. He carved pipe stems by the fire and refused to meet Eliza's eyes. On the second morning, he handed her a bag of coins and said only, "They deserve more than this place." She didn't thank him. She took the bag and turned away. They left before dawn the 3rd day, the children bundled in buffalo robes, riding double behind their mother and Cota. The wind had softened and the sun rose clear. Addie leaned forward on the ride, chin against Eliza's shoulder. "Where are we going?" "To a place where you'll never be taken from me again," Eliza said. "Is he coming too?" Amos asked quietly, pointing toward Cota. Eliza glanced back. "Yes." "He's family now," the boy considered. "Good." They returned south with the spring. The camp had shifted to the low prairie near the water's edge, and when they arrived, the women came forward one by one, laying hands on Eliza's arms, the children's shoulders, as if grounding them to the earth. Nemaha took Addie's hand and nodded once. No one needed words. That night, after the fire had burned low and the children slept curled together under a new hide blanket, Eliza stepped outside the lodge and found Cota sitting beside the river's edge, sleeves rolled to his elbows, feet bare in the cold water. She sat beside him. "They're safe," he said. "They are," he looked at her. "And you," she looked at the stars, then back to him. "I am, for the first time in a long while," he reached for her hand. "You came through every fire, you still stand." Eliza turned to him fully. I don't want to stand alone anymore. You won't. He drew her into his arms, slow and certain as he always had. She leaned into him, her lips brushing his cheek first, then his mouth. It was warm, unhurried, the kind of kiss that didn't ask for anything more than what was already there. When she pulled back, her eyes shone. I want to marry you. His smile was quiet. We already belong, make it true, she said. All the way. The wedding was held at the next moonrise, the children placing Red River stones in a circle around the fire. Nemaher wrapped their joined hands in a strip of muslin dyed with sage. There were no speeches, only the silence of the river and the warmth of joined palms. Addie braided her mother's hair with wildflowers. Amos carved a tiny horse from pine and gave it to Cota with both hands. Afterward, they moved into a lodge of their own just beyond the elders' circle. Eliza painted the hide flap with 3 small birds, one for each of them and a 4th beside it, wings outstretched. She learned how to dry chokecherries into cakes. Cota taught Amos to ride bareback. Addie followed Nemaha through the hills, learning the names of every route. Each night, Eliza and Cota lay beneath the stars, their fingers twined, the fire crackling low. Peace, when it came, was not loud. It was the hush of children breathing in the dark, the press of warm hands. The slow, steady rhythm of a life built from what survived, and they lived that life together for all their days.